monitoring.
It's not county business. I don't know who the hell she thinks she is, but I'm about to knock her in the next week. I don't know. But she's not gonna.
Unless she's sat
Yeah, we fun. Yeah.
I haven't had supper yet, actually.
Time from work to a meeting over here.
Yeah.
Honestly, I just want my couch and I want food.
I lost my debit card. So it's like,
You need some?
no, I've got it right now. This debit card's really cool. Yeah, I can use that.
A little bit of
I just get a drink.
a little bit of
No, I'm fine.
You sure?
I just need to order another one. But then I shut it off, and then everything I have it tied to is not gonna
Oh,
work.
yeah. This one through that got compromised.
It's the second time I've gotten a non-deliverable when I
From a county?
yeah.
I don't know why I have.
But if I forward it, then it goes. It's weird.
Okay, ready to get started? Call the Budget Committee meeting to order. It is January 30th at 6 p.m. Do a roll call. Let's see. Present is Tim Morse, Martha Thurnhaber, Mark Bennett, Jeremy Williams, Annette, and myself.
Is that the agenda?
Item 3 is review and discussion of the forensic audit of the Shelby, the Sheriff's Department. In front of you, or in a roundabout somewhere on the table, is the forensic audit. Basically, I just want to go through this. There's, well, 4 of you are new since April of 22 when this was published. Published April 5th, 22. Just for the sake of argument, it's 11 pages, so I think we can buzz through it pretty quick. But go through each page. Anyway, in the introduction, the 2020 forensic audit was engaged to audit the payroll for Shelby County Sheriff's Department of a period of January 2015 through July of 2020. During the engagement, we reviewed payroll, bank accounts, collective bargaining agreements, as well as bank statements for the county as well as the Sheriff's Department. We reviewed individuals within the Sheriff's Department, County Clerk's Office, and Treasurer's Office. Our report is not intended to declare whether fraud has occurred, but rather to identify if there was indicators of fraud. The decision about whether an item is fraud or error is determined by a trier of fact. So in the simplest form, this is the executive summary here on page, well, it's page 2 after the cover page. But in its simplest form, the payroll function can be summarized as taking the hours a person worked on multiplied by the rate of pay and subtracting deductions to arrive at net pay. We found errors in each portion of that function. We identified several of them in detail and also several topic only. The total value of errors included in our report is $759,379. The net result of these errors is net underpayment to the employees of $62.83. In addition, the amount payments to taxing bodies is $67,112, more than should have been paid. The level of problems of inconsistencies should be alarming to the county, and steps should be taken to mitigate the financial risk that your inadequate policies and procedures pose to the department, county, and staff. The county board should be aware that there are numerous errors, inconsistencies, inadequate records should cause numerous state and federal agencies to demand actions to correct your prior and future actions. So, next page. If you look at what is owed to the county, owed to the employees, underpaid by the county, overpaid by the county. The owed to the county part is $326,315. That's an accrual of impact of the 410 versus 5/8 work schedule, which was a discrepancy in the contract. The rate of pay, there was two employees with a rate of pay error. Health insurance is not deducted, excessive personal days, extra comp time, and vacation deficit, all subtotaling to that $326,315 number. Owed to employees is back to the 410 versus 5/8 issue is $228,854. The underpayment due to select tier 2 employees was $16,424. Worked holiday comp time 12 versus 15. Worked holiday comp time 12 versus 15 is the number is $20,352, and then worked holiday pay is $14,106. Over 80 hours paid at straight time was $10,622, and benefit pay not awarded was $42,240. Subtotaling $332,598. $332,598. Underpaid by the county, subtotal of $16,677, which was two things: taxes avoided by improper holiday pay and taxes avoided on overtime not paid. And then overpaid by the county, taxes paid on hours not worked, SLEP on wages not eligible, which SLEP is the IMRF retirement eligibility. Taxes on improper deduction, that subtotal came to $83,789. So the absolute value of the errors was $759,379, as I stated originally in the first page. But the net from A to B is $62.83. So in the summary payroll procedure, the Sheriff's Department operates under a collective bargaining agreement, which is a contract that governs the expectations for the employer and the employee. During the audit period, there were two different CBAs in operation. If there's a modification or amendment to the CBA, then a document should be filed with the county clerk to record such changes. Payroll hours and benefits are calculated at the Sheriff's Department and submitted to the Treasurer's Office for processing payment to employees. Several procedures changed during the scope of the audit period. Because of these changes, some findings are not only applicable to part of the audit period. Because of these changes, some findings are only applicable. Okay, so right. It only applies to the period of time between January 2015 and 2020. Or 2020. So the findings were rate of pay, vertical movement. The labor contract specifies in section 21.3 that at the anniversary date, the employee will advance one step on the pay schedule. This creates two pay schedule movements each year. A horizontal pay adjustment would be on September 1st of each year, and a vertical pay adjustment would be made at the anniversary date of each employee. During the entire audit period for all the applicable employees, it was observed that both rate of pay adjustments were made at the September 1st date. So that is finding number one, that they were to have one at anniversary and then one at September 1st.
On each diagonal.
So it moves them vertically and horizontally on the pay schedule. This would have the net effect of depriving the employees of an increased rate of pay on their anniversary until September 1st. This would also this would result in funds owed from the county to the employee. Contract date is another finding. The contract applicable to 2015 through 2017 contains provision in 21.1 which indicated that the years of service of the staff as of 9/2011 will be used to determine their years of service for the schedules. There's potential that there was an oversight during the preparation and execution of the contract, but that is what was signed by the representatives of the county and the Sheriff's Department, Fraternal Order Police, Legal Counsel. It said the contract was then filed with the clerk and there were no modifications filed in relation to the contract. This provision will cause employee pay rate to be inaccurate for the 2015-2017 contract until the new contract is ratified. So what that's basically saying is we were operating under a 2015 to 2017 contract under the 2011 pay scale because that language has never changed. Next finding is a specific rate of pay. From 2015 through August 2016, Tyler Kuntz was paid a rate that was arbitrarily 50 cents an hour above the pay schedule. This impacted 1,600 hours, regular pay of 11 hours, overtime did amounts in 808.25, overpaid to him for this issue alone. As of September 2016, he was placed on the appropriate rate of pay according to the schedule. In 2015 to 2016, David Myers was paid at a rate was arbitrarily 50 cents an hour above the pay schedule. This impacted 888 hours of regular pay and 19 overtime. This amounts to $458 overpaid for this issue. In addition, Dave Myers was one of the only instances of vertical pay movement that was observed during the audit period. The contract specifies that employees not on Unit A or B contract specifies that employees not on Unit A or B payroll schedules that were hired after the date of the contract would be paid at a starting rate of $24,000 a year. They would not receive a pay raise until their fourth anniversary of service. Their fourth anniversary of service. They consistently paid at the rate that did not agree with the contract, and raises were not in accordance with the contract. Contract inconsistencies is the next finding. Contract pay for the jail matron, cook, janitor, and secretary bookkeeper is identified in the 2011 through 2014 contract on page 17 as starting as $24,000, increased base pay of $1,000 per year for the years 2011 through 2014. In the contract for 2015 to 2018, the language was changed, and an employee being hired in 2015 was ratified that would be paid $27,000 a year after the contract would be at $24,000. In either case, the employees weren't paid at rate consistent with the contract. Method of turning in payroll to the treasurer. The initial procedure for how employee pay was provided to the treasurer was inherently problematic. Payroll would be turned into on a Monday for payroll that was on Friday for hours worked through Saturday. In a system that considers actual time worked for overtime purposes, you would never have an accurate payroll. During the audit period, the procedure was changed to pay in arrears, which was more fiscally appropriate for the procedure. 10-hour days versus 5 8-hour days. Starting in 2015, deputies started working a schedule that included 4 10-hour days followed by being off for 4 days. This created 2 separate issues. The first of these issues is that a schedule 4 on 4 off would not provide the expected 40 hours in the week expected by the contract. We used duty schedules to compare to the payroll to determine how many hours were expected to be worked versus what was actually worked. Additionally, the contract stipulates that any hours in excess of 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week are to be paid in overtime, are considered overtime. Overtime is required to be paid at time and a half. When employees work 10 hours, then they were paid straight time when they should should have 8 hours straight pay and 2 hours of time and a half. This is problematic when you consider that deputies in SLEP Tier 2 do not get to count overtime as wage eligible for their pension. Do not get to count overtime as wages eligible for their pension. SLEP Tier 2 is for the deputy hired after January 1st, 2011. During the course of our review, it was noted that the amount of $228,854.47 was underpaid to the deputies for overtime. Tier 1 employees were underpaid $119,160.23, and Tier 2 deputies were underpaid $109,694.24. The Tier 2 employees had their gross pay based on 10-hour day reported as wages for pension purposes when only 8 hours should have been reported. This caused the county to withhold $16,424.54, too much from the deputy pay, and the county paid approximately $26,279 too much, assuming, in parentheses it says, assuming that 12% county contribution. IMRF calculations and liabilities should be reviewed for any corrective action that should be taken in this regard. When the deputies were working 4-on 4-off schedule, they were not working the hours anticipated by the contract. They were working 11,808 hours that were paid but were not worked during the audit period. The total amount of overpayment is $276,786.31. In addition to overpayments to the deputies for this time, there would have been approximately $54,388 paid to Social Security, Medicare, and IMRF for those by the county, 4 hours not worked. Health insurance not withheld appropriately. Insurance was not withheld from employee pay appropriately. The contract indicates that the employee portion of the insurance should be at $40 per pay period. The payroll cycle is to pay every other week, which creates 26 payrolls per year. The health insurance was only deducted twice per month, which would have been correct if there were 24 payrolls a year. There would be, so moving on to the next page, there would be 2 months per year that would have 3 payrolls in the month. During these 2 months, the health insurance was not withheld. This would create an amount that was due to the county from all the employees in the Sheriff's Department, which enrolled in health insurance. There were 33 employees involved in this error. The error causes overpayment of taxes to Social Security and Medicare. The net impact would be $95.59. Of this amount, of the $95.59, $8,880 was the amount owed by the employees to the county, and the remaining amount is the excess paid by the Social Security and Medicare taxes. From the beginning of 2015 through December 2015, the contract applicable to compensate and benefits was the contract from 2011 to 2014. The amount to be deducted from the employee's pay reference 2008 and 09 would have been 2 contracts prior to the 2015 payroll. There was not an amount that we attribute to this error, but we believe it to be a significant issue that the contracts are not being reviewed thoroughly enough for approval or performance against the contract. Next finding is the personal days and excessive allowance. The contract allows for 3 personal days per year for all full-time employees. These days are to become available on September 1st and are a use it or lose it basis. According to the contract, a day is defined as 8 hours, therefore 24 hours of personal day will be available each year. The sheriff's deputies that work 10-hour shifts were allowed to take 30 hours of personal time, 6 hours in excess of the time intended by the contract. The impact of this error is that 14 different deputies incorrectly received 6 additional hours for a total of 402 hours. This results in too much being paid to the deputies' payroll, Medicare, Social Security, and SLEP. The net consequence of this error is $11,727. Dental insurance. Dental insurance is considered a pre-tax for federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare taxes during 2015-2017. The insurance was not being treated as pre-tax. The impact of 26 people who had dental insurance, the proper treatment caused the county to pay $2,441.58 too much in Social Security and Medicare. The impact of this error to the employees will have been more pronounced as they paid too much Social Security and Medicare, as well as the W-2 forms would have been incorrectly too high. The impact to the employees was potentially $5,000 too much in federal and Illinois taxes they were subjected to. Additional comp time credit. Several employees received excess comp time credit of 40 hours. During the 2015 through 2018, it was noted that there were 9 employees that were documented to having received a total of 1,000 hours of comp time above and beyond what the contract allows. The comp time results in either time off for the employee or that amount is paid as compensation. When looking at the net consequence of this on the hours and resulting in an impact on Social Security, Medicare, and the employer contribution to IMRF, all these amounts were paid for time that was not allowed in the contract. The net consequence of this excess comp time is $25,789.83. Accumulated comp time greater than allowed. The contract allows for the accumulation of comp time up to 480 hours. When the review of the records for comp time, it was observed that during the audit period 2015 to 2020, there were 4 employees which had comp time accumulated above the 480 hours. There were 15 occurrences where that was observed. We did not determine the financial impact of this error, but it is a compliance failure with the contract nonetheless. Vacation deficit. According to the contract, vacation is credited to the anniversary date of the employment. From 2015 to 2020, vacation was granted on January 1st for all employees. The error in the date of awarding vacation caused 139 occasions where 23 employees were granted vacation time, which resulted in negative balance of vacation. In addition, people who left employment would have the ability to take vacation that they had not yet earned. During the audit period, there was an occurrence where an employee left employment and was paid a vacation that they had not earned yet. The amount that the county overpaid the affected employee was $1,865. So that was just one instance, and it references 23 employees that this was observed on. So worked holiday comp time earned. Contract indicates that employees that work on a holiday is to receive time and a half for all hours worked. The employee has the ability to be paid or earn comp time. During the audit period of 2015 to 2020, it was determined that there were 247 instances where the deputy worked 10-hour day but was only credited with 12 hours of comp time. The employee should have received 15 hours of comp time. This creates a liability from the county to the employees. The impact of this error, the county should have paid $20,352 more to the employees, including the impact of the Social Security, Medicare, and SLEP. In addition, this would have the potential to incorrectly represent compensation for pension purposes.
Can I speak to that just a second while we're there?
Go ahead.
I would like it publicly known that at the time when we were doing payroll and getting payroll sheets, the only thing that I received was a holiday sheet with the employee, and it would state holiday worked or holiday not worked. 8 hours. So when they worked a 10-hour shift, they were turning into that office for pay 8 hours. Now, as the treasurer paying payroll, I had no idea they were even working 10 hours. When I got a phone call in January 2020, I said, no, they work 8. But the only thing I had to go on, because we didn't turn in payroll, we had no timekeeping, was that holiday pay sheet. So I just want it well known that they were requesting pay for 8 hours. Does that make it right? No, it does not. But that was the documentation that I received from December of 18 until January of 2020. They requested, and if it went into comp time, then at time and a half it was 12. And that's the way we tracked it, because that's what they requested. Just, I want it out there.
So worked holiday paid to payroll. When an employee worked on a holiday, nope, I'm sorry, did I get through that one already?
No.
No. So paid through payroll. So when an employee worked on a holiday, they were paid time and a half on top of the standard pay. During the audit period, there were 184 instances where deputies worked a holiday and were only paid for 8 hours, and then they should have been paid for 10. This results in an underpayment of 2 hours per paid worked holiday, which should have been paid at the time and a half. This resulting impact of the error is that the county underpaid the deputies $14,106 after Social Security, Medicare, SLEP, and total values of error. Total value of error is $16,878. And we'll come back to a bunch of these if you have questions in a little bit. Sick time incorrectly allocated. Sick time was to be awarded at 1 day per month of service for the years 2015 through 2019. The sick time was granted for the entire year on January 1st. This error appears to have been corrected for 2020, but there were 84 instances where 7 employees were granted sick time that resulted in a deficit balance. In addition to the ability to receive paid sick time in violation of the contract, it was also observed that when an employee left employment, their sick days at the date of the separation from service were included in the amount of sick days turned into IMRF or SLEP. This would create an inaccurate record of compensation for pension purposes. There were 3 instances where 3 employees were awarded 96 hours, more than they should have when they separated from service. 2016 overtime. During 2016, it was observed that 41% of all the deputy overtime in the entire year was turned in on a singular payroll date. This date was the first date of a new step rate for contract pay rates. This appears to be statistically unlikely that there were no records available to support the hours worked. And as an example, one employee had 19 hours of overtime for September 9th payroll, but only had 21 hours for the entire year. It was noted, okay, next point is overtime not paid at time and a half. It was noted that there were 123 instances where employees were paid for over 80 hours on a paycheck, and then it was paid at straight time. This error is more prevalent during the years 2015 to 2017 than 2018 to 2020. The net effect of the error is underpaid the employees by $9,762.65, $9,792.65 of gross pay. There were insufficient records to support how many hours were worked by staff. Next bullet. Full-time employees treated as part-time. It was noted that there were numerous instances where employees worked full-time hours, but was at the rate of pay that not aligned with the contract for any of the positions. When a person does not receive the benefits outlined in the contract, in parentheses, in addition to insurance, etc., they have not been compensated for the time that other full-time employees have received. This would typically deny the approximately 320 hours of paid time that other employees receive, paid time being vacation, sick, and personal. The net effect of this error is estimated to be $42,240 that has been underpaid to the employees. Employees, next bullet, is employees not enrolled in IMRF. When an employee has worked or expected to work 1,000 hours or more in a year, they are to be enrolled in IMRF. Several instances of employees who should have been enrolled in IMRF were not enrolled. There were 6 instances where employees should have been enrolled, or IMRF should have been withheld from their pay, as well as county contributing to their portion. The estimated impact was $5,497. This should have been withheld from the employee's pay at $13,905 should have been the county rate. So, just to clarify, the estimated impact is that $5,497 should have been withheld from the employee's pay, and $13,905 should have been the county's contribution. And that is assuming a 12% county contribution. So in the last bit of this, it's miscellaneous things that were found. An employee was paid 3 hours of holiday pay on a day when there was no holiday. An employee had a non-worked holiday that was paid for also comp time, sorry. An employee had a non-worked holiday that he was paid for that also earned comp time of 8 hours. 2 employees take an unpaid day for holidays and then use the holiday at the date of their discretion. A deputy took a 10-hour personal day and also earned 8 hours comp time the same day. An employee was paid 6 hours overtime when the attendance records did not reflect any overtime worked. Comp time earned was commonly at an amount that is inconsistent with time and a half allowance. An employee was paid 160 hours of comp time that did not show up in attendance reports. An employee had sold back 16 hours vacation and 205 hours of comp time that was never showed on a payroll report. During the 2018, an employee time slip indicated overtime was worked and comp time was granted. It was granted at a 1-to-1 basis when it should have been a 1-to-1.5 basis. The result shortage of the employee was 36 hours of pay and would have been 830.88 due to the employee. During 2018, an employee requested a vacation day that was denied by management. The employee was charged a vacation day on their attendance record. 2 employees would commonly take a holiday as unpaid day off and then credit comp time to take an additional day off at a later day. This is not identified as a possibility by the contract and results in fewer hours being worked than anticipated. And lastly, the comp time was earned at rates that don't correspond with natural numbers of hours. Comp time is to be earned at the rate of time and a half, but would commonly be turned in for amounts that don't correspond to any logical calculation. For example, 5 hours comp time would be 3.3 hours, or 8 hours would be 5.33 hours. So that is the end of the 11-page forensic audit from 2015 to 2020. Any questions, comments? I saw people circling stuff.
Hands almost out of ink.
I have a question, Bonnie. It's on page, these aren't numbered. Second from the last. The very top of the page where it says there were insufficient records to support how many hours were worked by staff. And I don't know if memory serves right, but were there not records that were withheld when the forensic auditor requested them, that then were later turned over to somebody that FOIA? Am I remembering that right?
Yes.
Yeah, for the sake of argument, I went back and found that one, that email. And this report was dated August 5th, and the FOIA was received, I believe, on August 14th, or April 14th of 22. So it was requested of the logged in, logged out report, so they could verify how many hours was worked, what days, et cetera, and those were withheld.
So was any action taken for that? Any consequences for that behavior?
None thus far.
When he did the examples of taking an employee overpaid and an employee underpaid, I don't think it's ever been, you have to go every employee to actually see what the most advantaged and the least advantaged. We don't have those kind of numbers because we'd have to work the scenario of every single employee. Wouldn't that be correct?
It would be hard because we don't, and even the log in, log out report we had covered almost 12 months, not quite. So we don't even really have any kind of log in, log out report, only what they were paid, and then only we have schedules. We were provided schedules for the various
Yes.
positions over there.
There was not a true time in, time out. It was just they were scheduled to work.
Well, there was, according to a FOIA response, and it was literally 100 and some odd pages for logins and then 100 and some odd pages for logouts, and you had to compare them. At which point I've got a stack of papers about yay tall where one of my employees and I went through every single one of those and put them on calendars, which is what was turned over, but we only for those 12 months. So you can get a better estimate from those 12 months for the, 5-year period. it would be very,
We don't have a report that shows the total over and the total under for, on a year-by-year basis of each of these
No.
contract years,
not
correct?
by year.
So it did say in the report that 2015, 2016, and 2017 there were significant changes to the records after 2018.
Correct.
Well, that's when I started questioning everything and requesting more documentation. Like, I didn't know, when they talk about, employees who were working full-time, and I need more than full-time, but we weren't offering them insurances, any benefits because they just labeled them part-time. But when I was getting, payroll reports, it didn't say how many hours. The initial, when I started, it was, hey, employee Jones, X amount. Employee Smith gets X amount. There was nothing to reflect any kind of hours or anything, so I had no idea. And then when we had an employee leave, and I asked, and that was probably a year in, I learned that, we kind of had that problem. But the other thing, then to this, and one thing that I've tried to ask council, I think council needs to weigh in, because it's saying, they should have been paid for 10 hours of holiday pay, but they didn't request it. Why did they not request it? Why were they had to have known they were only getting 8 hours, but they were working 10. But there was no MOU, but there was some kind of verbal agreement between the sheriff and the employees to accept only 8 hours of holiday pay. And then that being said, there was also some kind of an agreement that on the weeks that they were only working or scheduled and working 30 hours, if they picked up an extra day to cover somebody, those 10 hours were paid at overtime. When they were really only bringing, should have been regular time, because it was only coming to the 40-hour work week.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. They were supposed to be available for 5 days at 8 hours a day,
That's what the contract called for.
instead of just working 4. Even though they work 4 days, 10 hours a day, technically, they still should have worked the 5th day for 8 hours to actually follow the contract.
Well, they should have just been working 8 hours
Right.
without an MOU. I mean, there was
Yes.
never an MOU that was passed, and nobody, like I said, I didn't know they were working.
Yeah, which it contributed to errors going forward, even when
Yeah.
you started, because
So I just wonder, what I would like council to weigh in on is, if they agreed to it, they agreed to work the 10 hours, they agreed to not get overtime for the 2 hours, that the 10 hours, the 40 hours in one week just counts toward 40, and not the 2 hours of overtime. There was a whole lot of agreement going on here that a whole lot of employees were working. So where was the agreement? Was it the handshake, winky wink, we're gonna agree to this? Because there were never MOUs filed.
so they were technically working 32 hours at regular time,
Yeah.
and then
So this
8
report
hours of
is based on the contract. But there was some kind of an agreement to push the contract by the wayside.
would you say we had very many instances where they actually worked over 40 hours and worked the 5 days? In other words,
Worked 50.
Not
yeah,
very-
50 or 48.
Not very often. Not from what I saw, just tracking those 12 months. Because if they did end up picking up a shift to cover somebody, now this is only the deputies. A lot of this is speaking to corrections officers, so this is not just the deputies, this is department-wide. I haven't looked at that documentation for quite some time,
Yeah.
but no, I didn't see a lot of hours or weeks where they worked more than
The 40.
40, but they were getting straight pay. That fourth shift on that odd week was counted as overtime because it wasn't scheduled.
Was there a good reason why the board voted to go to the 410 and left the contract alone?
Board didn't, nobody knew.
Board didn't
even know.
So why did it change then if it wasn't with the contract?
The sheriff did it.
The sheriff did it
Sheriff was making
arbitrarily.
a decision to do It never went before the board.
It was extra contractual. It was done outside the contract, no MOU or anything.
And it was kind of hush-hush. It was even so much so, Tim, that the committee at the time, I mean, when we first started having this conversation, you know, you on the law enforcement committee who had been on that committee since 15 had no idea. I mean, I can remember one board member in particular just being flabbergasted, gutsick. Oh my gosh, they're working tens and we didn't even know it. And I will say that I mean, I didn't come into office till December of 18, but you know, even my employee that's been here throughout, they had no idea. Nobody knew.
And then with an interview that was done by the Illinois State Police, having to do with some of this part-time period, it was reported that they were salaried.
No. I mean, well, I think everybody is well aware. I mean, John Vanderberg said it. I can tell you that the FBI said it. The state police said it. Rob has said it. Anybody that our auditors have said it. Every auditor that we've had, that our contracts are terrible. They contradict themselves every which way, whatever. Since I started, I never liked the matrix that they even do. Because the matrix can be wrong, but it's like they are not salary. And Don Coops said even after we started, you know, before the interview on the tapes, well, if I hire someone and they work 1 hour, I've got to pay them whatever that salary is, $42,000. Where does that ever, you know, work? They're not salary. And right after I started, the whole county-wide, because the county really hadn't made any changes, and I think you can hear in those interviews that Rob McCall said we've done it the same way for 27 years. You know, there were major law changes in 1993. Major law changes in 1993 to which the county never became compliant with. You know, changes along the way. It's constantly changing, just like the change now with the PTO. I mean, you have to keep up with it. But that said, we didn't. We didn't track anything.
Who was the other audit before we had the forensic audit?
Well, there was Weston Company.
And they told us there was major issues. And then with the forensic audit, of course, Mr. Vandenberg pretty well nailed it in his summary of what was laid out with the previous payroll issues, which he said the contract was a farce and wouldn't be followed.
You could probably even go back to the audit that Mose Yawkey Lively did, and it was the same findings year in and year out that just got ignored.
Quiet back there. Question?
People don't usually complain about that.
The only thing I would go back to is just to deepen what Martha touched on. The log-in, log-out report was FOIA'd and obtained. And then the auditor asked for it and was told it had been destroyed. And then, so he never got it. And so the audit is incomplete. He was not provided with the information that he asked for and that he needed in order to complete the audit. And after that, I FOIA'd for it, and I got it. So my question is, if it had been destroyed earlier, how could I get it? But it was sent to me. Also, there was never any permission sent to destroy that document. So if it was destroyed, it was done without permission, which is completely inconsistent with the law, or would appear to be anyway. And also it was only temporarily destroyed because I got it later. So we have not just problems following contracts. It appears as though we may have integrity issues. We may have problems with public document destruction illegally. We may have issues with professionalism, honesty, and dishonesty. I don't know how you can tell somebody something was destroyed and then later give it to somebody else. It just doesn't make sense.
So I have a question to that. You mentioned that when Vanderburg requested, he was told it was destroyed and didn't have it. And then you, after that, you request it and receive it. So it is an incomplete audit. Have those records been turned over to Vanderburg, and should we be requesting now the audit to be finalized if those were the records that prevented this from being finalized? Because I don't know how we make it right with IMRF and whatever other entities we need to make it right
Social
with.
Security, Medicare.
Social Security, Medicare, IMRF. I don't know how we make things right with them.
I don't know how we go back. I did talk to IMRF back when this issue kind of first arose and y'all were talking about a forensic audit. And, our rep at the time, they don't really have a legal side. They're not going to come after us. It's not their job. It's our job to make sure pensions are reported properly. But she said they would like at least minimum 3 years of corrections. I can tell you that a lot of the employees that left in the midst of this situation just cashed out their pensions. So, there wouldn't be a whole lot there because then, they got money back, but then the county's portion that would have been toward their pension just sits there and goes toward whatever other pensions, that we have.
So
But
did we go by employee, each one, and make sure, especially the ones who've stayed, that they're compensated, especially the ones who paid back what was...
We haven't had anybody pay back anything.
Well, I was told that one of them worked for free to pay his back.
There's never been documented. First of all, you can't work for free.
I mean to pay, he worked on his days off to pay.
That was never documented and it's never been turned into my office.
That would be a huge problem.
You're talking about insurance, you're talking about, that puts the county, and I wish we could understand that we are putting taxpayers at risk here with liability, because then he gets, any employee gets angry, they pick up their phone, and this is what our HR gal told us. We joined CERM in 2018, we had 35 hours of training. The very first training period that we used out was they came in and did just an HR audit. That's when we were told these employees, well, not only the contract, but the employees are not salaried. They don't qualify for salary under the FALSA laws. But anyway, she told every department head then, at this point with these things in our lives right now, all an employee has to do is go to the Illinois Department of Labor, click, 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 hit send, and you've got a complaint. And then and I've tried to convey to everybody, if somebody in my department files a complaint, the whole county's getting audited. If it's the health department, if it's the sheriff, they're not just going to come in and look at that one employee and their problem. They are going to fine-tooth comb the entire county, and where we are not in compliance,
Who's the?
the Illinois Department of Labor. One complaint and they come in and they look at everything. So, you have that potentially. But I have not heard one word about any employee ever. That's the first I've heard.
Well, and it's not my department, and I can't speak to it, so, I'm not going to go any further with that conversation, because if nobody else knows anything, then there's no sense in,
Yeah.
if the
Sorry,
subject matter expert's not here, I don't know, it's going to go nowhere. Yeah.
So I go back to the question, has that information that was not turned over to Vanderburg been provided to him?
Not that I know of.
So in the meeting, when it was reported that we have the information that was withheld, he said at that point in time, it was not credible information because it was not direct sourced from the office, the sheriff's department. However, what I didn't think about and what he didn't realize is it was part of a FOIA and is labeled as such. All the way from top to bottom through the email chain, it's labeled as a FOIA, so that then is a document that he can use. Since then, there's just been time under the bridge. I mean,
There's been what?
just time under the bridge. It's been,
I think it was considerable
A
time
year and a
between the
half.
time it was FOIA for and the time period with which you received it.
I don't remember now.
So my
It was
question is,
April 14th when
does
they
this
were-
need to go to legislative committee to discuss and evaluate and vote on whether or not to send to the full board a request to provide that information that's now come to light via FOIA to the forensic auditor and allow him to complete the audit?
I think before that, you have to have legal counsel as to, you know, they were agreeing to work 10 hours and only get paid for 8 hours of holiday pay. They agreed to it. They turned it in, they accepted the pay. I would like to know from, I get that it wasn't in agreement with the union contract, but there was almost nothing that was being done in agreement with the union contract. You know, but, and so, to me, I would like to know if they accepted it. If these are the documents they turned in for pay, which stated 8 hours, do we technically owe them the 2 if that's all they requested? I mean, I don't know.
But that's
I don't-
speaking to one side of the equation, which is the underpayment side. Are these documents that were withheld going to speak to the overpayment side as well?
I don't know. I assume they would.
I'm going to, and without knowing what the calculations were, if I remember right, I'm going to use terrible terms here, but there's basically a think board on the wall, and that wall was as big as that one on the north side of the, and it was full of, you know, schedules and people, and so I can only imagine what it'd take to recreate that and then apply what the actual login and log out reports indicate. I'm going to venture to guess it's going to tell exactly who was overpaid and who was underpaid. Because those login, log outs have,
They're by name.
they're by name or by badge number. So it would be, I think it would be prudent that we have counsel, and then we could completely, well, I say completely, put a pretty drastic dent in recovery and the making whole of shorted employees. I think it can be done.
Doesn't that seem like the appropriate thing to do?
And I will just tell you this, if we, I mean, and I get we go that route, but we'll be hiring an extra person in my office because the tedious amount of work will take time away from the other duties of that office. There just will need to be an expense that's considered that is not in my budget, because
Right.
the amount of time that we spent the one winter going through that, you know, 2 of us spent a lot of time going through that. So,
The other part of that is, and this is where legal counsel is going to come in pretty heavy, is on the employees that were overpaid. That's basically, you'd have to basically file with, unless they return the funds, you would have to file suit for them.
I might say that, yeah, we're looking at, I don't think anybody's going to return funds to the county, but when you refigure this, that one employee's been overpaid in one area, underpaid in another area, so we don't really know what the true damages are if we're just paying out, because when you get done doing the equations, what was over, what's under for that single individual, it may be close to zero in some places. Others, it could be a $20,000 difference.
Yeah, you don't know if employee A has $10 overpaid and $10 underpaid, and his employee, and his is a wash, whereas the next one was 10,000 underpaid, and the next one's 10,000 overpaid. Because the numbers shake out so close, overpaid and underpaid, it's really a matter of combing through and sorting and making the appropriate funds in the appropriate spots.
So I'm gonna get back to a question I asked earlier. Are there any repercussions, consequences for actions of the person that did not provide the records that were requested to the forensic auditor at the time they were requested and at the time this think wall had all of this in there and everybody was knee deep in this stuff?
Well, I'll just go on record and say there darn well ought to be.
There ought to be.
Whether that's, I don't know that that's something that the board can do. I mean, you're talking about discipline for an employee in a department, and I don't think the board has that authority. I think that comes from the department or from the court if there's some kind of proceeding.
I will say the sheriff had MARA training tonight, or he would have been here, but he said he needs to get in the habit of having a budget committee meeting.
Well, he didn't become sheriff until, what, a few months after this report was rendered?
Right.
So his bearing on this report is
Right.
no.
He called me just to tell me that, so you guys would know that was why he wasn't here.
Yeah.
So is that a question that can be asked of our state attorney, Bobby?
I think, and I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm gonna say it. But I think if you listen to the state police investigation and the interviews of the various people, and I can tell you from going through the process and working with, I think Rob McCall truly thought the contract was being followed. He and I had numerous conversations where I was asked to pay something, I would contact him, he would be like, oh no, it's this, and then I'd, not gonna rehash that, but clearly in those interviews, the elected official, the department head, who is ultimately responsible for their department, had absolutely no clue what was going on. If I ran that office, not having one iota of a clue what was going on, we'd have a Dixon, Illinois with $53 million out the door. I mean, the bottom line is, either way, the elected official is responsible. And he clearly had, he said it time and again, he had no idea. As a department head, as the elected official that answers to the public, to the taxpayers, you might not know the inner workings, but you have to have some kind of idea. And you at least have to have a little bit of oversight and know what's going on. So I think if anything else, the responsibility stops there. If you want to go deeper than that, the responsibility lies with that elected official and that department head.
Just for the record, I wrote down the question that was asked of Mark on this piece of paper. I laid it down in front of Mark, but it's not for Mark to read. He can read it, but that's the question. That's what I wrote down, just for my clarity. It wasn't a no. So I've got that question.
Is that the one that you're gonna ask of
Council,
okay.
what are repercussions for short payment and overpayment? And basically, what are the repercussions for the board if nothing's done?
Well, I want to know what the repercussions are for the information that was requested not being provided at the time it was requested. That's when the county taxpayers are paying to have a forensic audit performed and somebody is withholding.
Can't we
What
just
could be
ask for them now, the record?
But the issue becomes, like Bobby said, when this was going on, because it was so convoluted, they had a whole wall of notes with arrows here, there, and that's probably not still on Vanderberg's office wall. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't provided at the time, two years ago when this happened. Now to go back, the taxpayers would probably get to pay to redo all of that again. Where if it would have been provided right then and there, when he was in the middle of the audit,
So what we're talking about here is a double bind. And so there's no quick fix to that. It's just out there as a question and a double bind. So where do we go from there?
and that's where I would like legal counsel to weigh in.
Okay.
And I think a quick question that I can ask John is, how easy would it be for him to draw that information back up into a spreadsheet? Or is it just sitting back, on a hard drive somewhere? He can draw that back up and then start applying new numbers to it.
Oh,
I'd hope that information's still there.
yeah,
And-
Yeah.
I think it would be.
okay.
And it's hard to say, how many pages were in the login, logout reports?
Oh, 168, 172. I mean,
I don't remember.
it was every day for every person for just shy of 12 months.
I'm gonna guesstimate it takes one person 6 months to collaborate all that, at least 6 months, and I mean solid straight through,
And yeah,
One
that's all
person.
they're doing.
if that's all they're doing. So even if we ordered an audit, not by order, but, placed an order, I think it'd be this time next year before it's even,
We're going into tax season.
yeah, right
We're
now
going
it's
into
actually.
their busy season.
So, nonetheless, that's things we could look into.
I would like to get answers to those questions as quickly as possible. Because if we need to move on something, we might as well get on it.
Can I speak to something that maybe the budget,
We moving on?
Well-
Or this?
but something that is still an issue that, I had emailed about some time ago, but I know there's contract negotiations, but I think it needs, at this point, we only have one SLEP Tier 2 deputy. Everybody, or SLEP Tier 1, everybody else is SLEP Tier 2. One of the concerns that I've had and addressed, and it's never been fixed, but when they can comp, and I talked to IMRF several years ago, when they can take holiday time and comp it, and it goes into the comp bank, that comp time technically qualifies for IMRF. But if they work overtime and throw that into the comp bank, that doesn't qualify for IMRF, but we only have one comp bank. And when they work comp time, it goes into our computer system as comp time so that we pay IMRF on it, but it's being drawn from a pool with hours, some hours that qualify, some that don't. So we still have pension recording issues. I don't know how we take care of that. But it's just something that, I asked the sheriff's department long before Brian was here with Coons, and then I think with, what was his name? McQueen, asking that they keep track of those comp times separate. But then you gotta think, well, okay, so this deputy's using, now they use 12 hours of comp time. Was that coming out of the OT comp time that's gonna qualify for pension, or was it coming out of the holiday comp time that qualifies? I mean, you see it's a major issue. Personally, I'm hoping that the contract, they just can't even, if you work a holiday or don't work it, get paid for it. We gotta find a way that it's all one, because we're still not properly reporting to IMRF. Just throwing it out there.
Still not?
We are not. No. But I don't know how to fix it. But it's a conversation that has to be had. To find a fix.
Okay.
Oh, why, that's switching back.
I don't know why it is.
We have some spreadsheets. You may have to,
Are both cords plugged in? Tight?
There, it changed a little bit.
You have HDMI selected.
Yeah. Does that help?
There we go.
It could be a Hertz being off.
Could be what?
What?
It has to do with the refresh, but Hertz, sometimes they can be off because the computer requires one and the projector requires another. And it has to do with the voltage. Never mind.
Can you record the screen for people at home, like with that? Maybe they won't, they'll know what they're looking at.
I don't know that it's gonna pick it up.
Maybe not.
So, if we can kind of keep it, which it's flashing in now.
HDMI source detector. I'm trying to figure out what that is.
Here, I'll let you sit here.
Basically what we're looking at is general fund, revenue and expense report for the last,
Completely unplug from your, and just wait about 20 seconds and then plug it back in.
Okay.
but in the meantime, we can go to the item 4 on the agenda was ARPA update discussion and vote on recommendation obligation for projects. On the sheet that's in front of you, it's got expenditures and then committed / estimated remaining. So far, it shows we've got 1.453, $1,453,493 spent in expenditures, with the approximate remaining uncommitted amount at $2,545,356 remaining uncommitted. And that is taking into account the board obligation for $100,000 for patrol cars, is the special prosecutor and scan modernization projects. With those numbers, what has not been used?
What's not been used, but what has been accepted, moved on by the board, yes.
So more than likely, those numbers will remain on there, which is about $9,000 worth. So, in the grand scheme of things, it's a small percentage of the total.
I don't know if we're done with the special prosecutor or not. I don't know. I haven't asked.
But either way, the combination of
It's
two
not a
is $9,000 on a $2.5 million remaining
Right.
balance is negligible.
Is there anything on here for the road grader? We allocated some money.
Right, so
150. That's true.
highway tandem was 150,000.
Excavator was 90.
Highway excavator was 90,000.
There was no movement on that. There was discussion, and my understanding was he was supposed to come back with a more specific,
Oh, right.
when he found something, so you've not
Right.
passed it, so it's not in.
I thought we voted to give him up to
150?
150. I
Yeah,
thought was it.
we allocated 150 so he could go
So
shop.
this is through 124, and I'm just gonna tell you, the minutes haven't been accepted, so
Okay,
they don't include anything that happened in January for the sheer fact they don't have,
which that was the only
Minutes.
thing, wasn't it? Yeah.
Okay. So a rough estimate of dollars that we think is approved,
Whatever y'all approved for the,
Is 150,
Up to,
so 150, 356, or I'm sorry. 000.
so it was up to 150?
I think so.
356.
Right.
Minus 100
That might need to be verified.
equals-
See, and I don't see minutes or anything
Sure.
until they're
Okay.
passed and posted up for the next
So
meeting.
after you take out the 150,000 for highway, we're at 2.4 million, so 2,395,356 is what's remaining in ARPA. So the discussion here is, I know that public safety is discussing windows, moving forward on the windows finally. And in the process of moving forward on the windows, we were guesstimating a $1.2 million project. And from what I'm understanding is that's going up almost double. From what I'm understanding, it's not going to be 1.2, it's going to be, from what I'm gathering, closer to 2. Because the labor costs have gone up that far.
So the estimate was 1.2, not 2.1.
There is no estimate.
Okay.
I'm just saying preliminary guesstimations
Yes.
Discussions.
put, or in discussions, put labor at $1 million. Well, according to the parts that was going to be required in 2016, in 2016, that was an $800 and some $1,000 parts list, I believe.
Wait, so this window project has been going on since 2016,
It leaves
Discussion.
but all of a sudden it's this board's problem
Yep.
and we're the bad guys for
Welcome to
not
it.
getting new windows?
Welcome to it.
Oh, we have ARPA funds now.
Exactly right.
This project's been going on a long time.
It was a part
But
of the.
I will tell you that
project.
for the longest time, they didn't have the funds to cover it. The county didn't have the funds to cover it.
Can I ask Bobby, just because I get confused on this, but the project that we are looking at moving forward on with the windows is not trying to do period historic windows. It's doing today.
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay.
Does
Because
anybody know
I thought
what,
that's what we voted on.
That's what I thought we did too. I just.
does anybody know how it went with the sheriff and the gentleman walking around the courthouse, how that went? Does anybody know? No. I don't either. No?
I mean, I think it went okay. I think they were just gathering more information.
Is there any way we can get rid of the orange garbage bag over the window and put a black one back up there?
Bobby, I would like to just remind you one issue that I kind of told you about as I was looking through all the documentation, that I don't know if you guys are gonna change this, but with a very confusing May meeting, you've allotted $15,000 for sign-on bonus for the highway department, $15,000 for retention, from what I can gather from the minutes, but his contract says that the sign-on bonus will be $30,000 with $15,000 retention, and it specifically says that $45,000 will come from ARPA. That's not what I can find in the actual board action, so I don't know if you're wanting to take action for the last $15,000, because it's not in a line item or a budget, except for ARPA, but I'm just throwing it out there because that's another $15,000. I could not find any documentation for the 45, only for the 30.
okay, so anybody remember that conversation? That muddy mess that we went through?
May was terrible.
I'd have to go back and look at notes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we go before the board with a $15,000 ARPA expenditure to cover the
The sign-on,
shortfall.
on the sign-on bonus.
Second it. That motion.
Because that extra sign-on, I believe that we'll be paying in March or April.
That's sign-on.
Yeah, it was, the way the contract reads, it's a $30,000 sign-on bonus, $15,000 retention. That retention you added at the June meeting, which was $5,000 at the end of year 1, end of year 2, end of year 3. What was, May was very confusing, and I've said, you know, read it because you passed something, then realized it wasn't on the agenda that way. So the way I read the May minutes, you ended up passing $15,000 sign-on. He got $7,500 week 1. At 6 months, he's going to get $15,000 sign-on. And at the end of 1 year, he's going to get $7,500 sign-on, plus the $5,000 retention, and then the 5. And it's spelled out that way in his contract with those amounts on those specific days. But from what I can find in the documentation, meeting minutes where actions taken, you actually only voted and approved and moved for $30,000, 15 in each. So the 15,000 for the extra sign-on bonus, but it says in the contract that these funds will be taken out of ARPA. They don't, I mean, it's not in a line item budget anywhere else. But it's going to have to be paid, you know, because he'll hit his 1-year anniversary September 1, which will be in this fiscal year. We were recording by then, weren't we?
Oh,
Yes.
It'll be out there.
Go back and listen.
And you can go back and read the minutes. I mean, I've read them, and it's just like, yeah, because there was amendments, and then there was motions, and then there was this, and then it was like, no, we need to scratch that because it wasn't on the agenda, and then it was redone, and
But then we came back in June and things changed.
Yeah.
But part of me says, and I think we've had this conversation, part of me says, well, we adopted the contract and said it would be coming out of ARPA. However, board action never was taken to obligate in a separate form.
okay.
So I made the motion to use ARPA to cover the shortfall and $15,000 sign-on bonus to complete the $30,000 sign-on bonus. Now, a second by Mark. Is there any discussion, questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Bobby, can I ask a question? You said, if I heard you right, we have roughly 2.3 million-ish left in ARPA funds that are unaccounted for. Did I hear that right?
2.395.
Oh,
So just under
2,395,356.
Okay.
Do we want to,
So then are you saying, did you also then say that the window project, which I don't think has been allocated at this point, is that correct?
Correct. It is not, it has not been committed.
Committed.
It's been sitting out there in discussion, and everybody knows in the back of their head that we're gonna need $1 million+ to do this project. So when we see this number of remaining uncommitted funds, if it does go to 2.1 versus 1.2, well, that leaves us about 200,000.
I guess my question is, at what point, knowing that that project is gonna be huge, that if we don't use ARPA funds for it, we're not gonna have the funds for it. At what point do we quit committing additional ARPA funds
right.
until we know darn good and well that we've got enough?
So we would need to have a contract signed with somebody to do the project by the end of this year.
By the end of 2024.
And what I was referring to back in a couple meetings prior to this was when I said if we don't use the funds, when I said it goes back in the general fund, what we can do is start billing the ARPA for general fund expenses for the last basically 2 years. So you know, we're gonna use ARPA to buy 2 patrol cars, but if the sheriff bought 2 other patrol cars when those 2 were wrecked a couple of years ago, last year, whatever it was, we'd go back and say, these were expenses during this period of time, and apply that back to the general fund. We just keep going right through. We did a $60,000
Yeah.
The elevator.
elevator project. That, we can bill that right back to ARPA. So we should start billing it across. Those were expenses that we incurred during the time when we had the funds.
And I was told as long as we have the documentation to justify those expenses, and we can provide that to the federal government as a legitimate expense of the county, which we have clearly in Jessica's office, then it would qualify. The federal government doesn't want one dime of this money back. Bottom line, they've done everything to make sure we get rid of it.
I guess I'm still lost on the answer to the question, do we need to quit committing
Yes.
additional ARPA funds at some point until we know or have a much better handle on what these windows are gonna cost us? Because even if we start committing these, if we can take something else, an elevator or this or that, and move it over, it doesn't put that 60,000 back in our pocket. That's just an issue of where it's allocated, correct?
No, it takes it out of the ARPA and puts it in the general fund, because it come out of the general fund.
I see what you're saying. So
So
we would
then-
charge it to ARPA, but that 60,000 would then move to the,
There'd
but
just be
you
a
still have to,
reimbursement.
you would still have to sit on it in the general fund in hopes of having it for a window project, correct?
Well, then at that point in time, it's general fund, and you could, well, at that point in time, you go, by rights, this is how it's gonna work. If, say you put $2 million in the general fund, that is not organic funds. I mean, it's not tax-based, it's not normal fees, fines, and taxes. So you put that in the general fund as unbudgeted income, then the next year you start out with a zero budget. Your tax base is only gonna put so much in the, or your levy is only gonna put so much in the general fund, but you then, and this is gonna drive people up the wall, you go into a $2 million deficit budget. It's effectively what you do. Because the prior year, you know, like I said, inorganically injected $2 million, but then the next year you're going to use it.
I see what you're saying.
It looks ugly on paper, but that's effectively how it's going to roll out. But no, I think Cody's moving forward on getting well, obviously the engineers have been out to look. I'm sorry, the architects have been out to look. Then they'll get the engineers involved, get the project started, and hopefully they'll have some sort of estimate for us in the very near future, and we can get it at least obligated. I'm sorry, committed.
Committed.
And that is, again, here to put definition to some terms. Every dollar in ARPA is obligated because it's budgeted. That doesn't mean it's committed. You know, a department head we have obligated $180,000 to the treasurer's office, but it's not until she commits those funds is it, you know, effectively spent. And it goes back to the definition of obligation before appropriation. We've made the appropriation, and then the obligation's made. But
As long as we have a signed contract for the windows prior to the end of the year, from what Bellwether, and I talked to Chris about it, once we have that signed contract, you know, that it's gonna be X amount, then they consider it committed, you know, and to be spent before 26 or whatever it is.
yeah, and it should be done before 26. If we're committed the funds in 24, effectively we could be projecting in 25, or 24 and 25.
Hopefully.
So, anyway, but with that said, it's a big question mark on where this project's going to roll in at. But we know that we're looking at right around 2.4 remaining. if windows go to $2 million, then what am I not thinking about, committee members, what am I not thinking about besides the communications project 911? Is there anything that has been brought to your attention?
I think these items easily go over what they are even quoted right now. Even the communications thing, it's been a while since that was brought to us. I can see that change.
Well, they're working on throttling some of that stuff right now, so. And then truthfully, they've gotten estimates, we have not gotten any bids.
Is there any grant money available for that project?
I do believe there is,
It seems
or
like-
there was. I should say there was. I don't know that there is.
Do we have a grant writer?
No.
Or does it just come down to what area it's
No, does Bellwether have a grant service, writer service?
Not that I'm aware of.
I didn't think so. No, we used to have a grant writer, so to speak, but that was through, I don't know, West Central did some of that, didn't they? Are you familiar with them? They were the job center out here on, so they have the job side of things where they're helping people employment, and then they also have their grant side where they help people write grants and do things like that. I think that's how they used to function, but I don't think they do that anymore.
Our village engineer just helped with all the grants, so I must work different on a county level.
Yeah, I don't know if our highway engineer and if, some of these, well, I don't know if Scott would have any experience with it. But the highway engineer runs, well,
They don't really write grants.
they don't write
They go into a
grants. They
pool.
operate off grants, but they don't write grants.
Exactly.
I just wonder with that 911 because that encompasses multiple fire protection districts, right?
We have that grant portal though that several
Mhm.
people have access to that just, and I'm assuming that grant portal lets you know at least what's available.
I just was curious if any grant money was out there.
That's through Sunlight, the grant portal.
Is it?
Or,
If we have to open this audit back up for further work, that may take considerable amount of funds.
I'm gonna guess it's gonna cost them close to what the original price tag was. And, yeah.
I just wonder at what point does it,
It become futile.
yeah.
Well, and that's where we need that's where we need counsel,
I mean,
so.
yeah, there's so many other things that seem to be taking priority,
I'm not sure the results are gonna change a lot to ask her again.
I'll keep saying it until I die. And I go back to, are there consequences for somebody that didn't turn over what was requested? I mean, that's my number one concern at this point. There's gotta be consequences for that. poor
You'd
baby.
think the state police would have done something, I don't know. I don't know how all that works.
Well, my hope is right now is the window bid comes in a lot less than what I'm expecting. Because I would, for public safety purposes, I'd like to throw a lot more than 300,000 at the communication project.
Right. There's such a huge risk going on right now with that. And just hypothetically, with the windows, I mean, is there absolutely no windows at all in the building that's good that we can't keep?
Oh, these windows are,
No,
no,
they're
not one.
practically
And
also.
it's the casings all the way down. It's rotten.
You know, I do think that if you look at our general fund balance right now, I mean, 4 years ago, we ran somewhere around, there were times we were under $2 million in that general fund. We were 3 payrolls away from who knew what. And I think we talked about it Or did you talk about interest from ARPA? Have you discussed?
No.
The other thing with the interest and all of the interest that we're getting off of CDs and out of the general fund, that money can just be transferred over to the general fund. It does not count toward, 4.2 million, and let's just throw out round numbers, we end up earning $250,000. That money, and according to, Bellwether has said this, that can just be swept into the general fund. There's nothing that says that is added to, which increases your ARPA money from 4.2 million to 4.45 million. So we are sweeping, will be sweeping a lot of interest money into the general fund that we're making off of ARPA, and it's legal. I've been advised it's legal. You all are paying our Bellwether $20,000 to advise us on ARPA, and that's been their advisement. So, that said, there's going to be, we're somewhere around $5 million in the general fund right now. So I'm just saying there's going to be, if we don't get it completely done with ARPA, we definitely have I don't want to say a cushion, but, extra that has gone into the general fund because of ARPA that could cover any remaining cost of the windows.
Right. But with that said, our budget obligation has also quite significantly increased over the last 3 years. So we went from a $5 million budget. And I realize that ARPA has ballooned the budget in an unnatural fashion. It took us from a $5 million-ish budget to what? $7.3 million in 2023. And so is the $2.3 million increase in our budget solely reflective of what this number is here as far as remaining balance, or is it actually more driven on the side of budget obligations? If you look at the budgets, the budget obligations is increased significantly. So I heed caution on, yes, the general fund has grown, but so has our budget obligation. When ARPA funds are gone, that's going to change significantly. So
No cushion there.
the cushion is going to,
Well, some of those obligations are gonna go, especially with payroll. You're gonna see payroll obligations go down quite a bit come September 1 of this year.
well,
They've already come down some, but
highway, if you remember, the highway's got a fleet of dinosaurs they're operating with, so there's just a compounding issue across the board. So it is good to know that we're generating some interest on the funds that we're not using right now, but we can calculate those in when they're pulled in. Any other questions, discussion on ARPA? If not, the only thing I had for ARPA was the motion to use $15,000 to complete the 30,000 sign-on bonus. So.
I think going forward, we need to make sure we look at that contract to make sure we've got everything covered before the end of 24. In other words, the other bonuses.
that's all covered under 30,000 you have already passed
Yes.
to spend ARPA. So those are covered under ARPA funds already.
Okay.
It's just leaving that
Just
other
fine.
15 out hanging.
Okay.
And that other 15 gets us to 45, not 30, is that correct?
Yes.
There was 30,000 of sign-on. There was 15,000 retention.
Gotcha.
We only had part,
Each time.
yeah, there's only part of the sign-on bonus that was obligated out of ARPA, the way the contract reads.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, I mean, we'll put this before the board and then review tape and see what the discussion was, and we may have something to actually take action on, we may not, but nonetheless, if we take action on it, we'll have it covered.
I would like to just suggest if you review the tape, but also review the minutes, because in order to report to the federal government the expenditures, I've got to submit those meeting minutes. So they're not federal, I don't think they're going to look at it, let's be honest, but the tape's not going to say anything.
Right.
It's what is in writing
Right.
that we are going to be submitting for reports.
Yeah.
So my request would be
So if there's a discrepancy, we'll do what we gotta
Then
do to make it right for you.
something would have to be amended in minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing further. Committee, I'd like to open up the floor, talk about a comment. Jake.
Yeah, well, I was looking at something on about there just a second. This is the Department of Treasury. It says premium paid may not exceed $25,000 for any single worker during the program. So how do we give someone $45,000 or $30,000 when the limit is $20? This is from the Department of Treasury. This is not me. So then down here it says confirm that the premium pay responds to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 health emergency. How did Dobson have anything to do with COVID-19? I don't, she wasn't even here. So how do you use COVID-19 money for that? How do you use it for scanning? That doesn't have anything to do with COVID-19 that I know of. I don't know how it could. I'm just asking questions because I'm not knowledgeable enough to know.
So you were looking on the Department of Revenue website, right?
I looked on the Department of Treasury website.
Department of Treasury.
They're the ones that originally sent the money to the state, and the state sent the money to us. But the Department of Treasury made the rules the way I understand it. And I could be wrong.
Bobby, we chose the standard allowance, which allowed any payment and did away with the original rules, is what Bellwether advised the board. I mean, they advised us not to do any
What
freaking
the
pay
time
flat.
cost had to do with ARPA time? We didn't have time cost before. What the
Right.
hell would you do with COVID-19 ARPA time?
So what she just said was the standard allowance is the option that we took. So the standard allowance basically takes the ARPA funds from the COVID rules that you're reading to anything that's budgeted out, that could be budgeted in the general fund, is eligible to be paid out of the general fund.
Could I see a copy of that rule sometime?
Yeah, I'm sure it's somewhere. That's been a couple of years ago.
So if that's true, I don't understand why the Department of Treasury is saying. I think if we're going to spend this money, some authority should be able to give us authority if we have the authority to spend. I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying I think the public needs to know if we do or we don't. Do we have the authority to do
Change
this?
the rules
Or
several
don't we have
times.
the authority to do it?
They changed it after,
I
know,
want
they did
this in
the
writing. I
laws.
want it from someone with authority, not from you. I want to know if these things can be used for the ARPA.
and I just said, and I got it from Bellwether, and I was FOIA'd for it, and I responded to the FOIA with the language out of the rules from the federal government. And because we were a county that received less than $10 million, the prior board, back in the beginning, opted for the standard allowance. And when they opted for the standard allowance, any legal payment could be used for ARPA
I'm not
funds.
saying you're not right, I just want to see a copy of it.
I don't have a copy because we paid Bellwether to do that.
Okay, then we'll ask Bill.
I have it in an email, and I have been FOIA'd for it, and I've sent it out. I'm sure you've probably seen that email.
I don't look at all the email.
Okay.
So we point
So
look at.
continue on. Go ahead, continue on.
Well, that's just what those are my questions.
Okay. Public body comment. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So the ARPA money, I understand what you're saying about reimbursing for expenses before. Get that. And I mean, if that's legal, then great. But I feel like that if we get to a point where, let's say we get back a bid on these windows, and it's going to be $4 million. God only knows. I mean, we've all watched prices, everything raise. But if we get back, a bid and we say, oh, we can't do all that. We got a couple options actually. could we've already paid for the engineering, right? That's what this last payment was for, was kind of like, what do we need, how do we fix it, and then come up with a number to fix it all. Could we do, like, if we come to that point, could we do, you know, a percentage of them? Do the floor that's most necessary? Do the ones that are the worst, the ones that can wait another year? That might be an option to get where you want to go and get some of it done that's most necessary. The other thing is, if you've got this money and it comes from the federal government, I mean, that doesn't happen easily. So, in my way of thinking, we got it, so why not use it for some capital improvements that we need in other areas? If we say, well, we really wanted to do this, this, and this, and those things are still kind of on the table because we need them, like this communication thing, which I have no knowledge of, I don't know anything about that. But if we still need that, and that's a need, then maybe the best idea would be to use some of this interest she talked about. And some of the ARPA funds budget so much for, you know, we've got, let's say we have 50 windows and 25 need replaced, and it's $1 million for it, let's say. Well, then if we need this communication situation taken care of, I think we should do that as opposed to paying ourselves back for stuff we already paid for. You see what I'm saying?
Right, and so in that conversation, it was, if we didn't get a window contract this year, then we would need to start reimbursing the general fund for those expenditures to take it out of the ARPA fund and put it into the general fund.
Right, but my point was, if we get to that point, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me reimburse things we already paid for. We're not in the hole for anything. So why not keep a list of all these other things that if we say, well, the price went up buku dollars, it's way more expensive, we can't do this right now, then why not have a list of those items and go ahead and go forth and allocate that money to those projects instead of paying ourselves back for things we already bought.
Okay, so in those terms, what needs to happen is we need to have the commitment. Okay, so the excavator, for example, I think the excavator is one of them that's, the deal's done. That's a committed, signed on the dotted line thing, so that's a committed expense. If we have the contract signed by the end of the year, then what we're talking about is minimal. And truthfully, it could go, if we have, like I said, if we have a $2 million window project, the remaining $395, I would propose to the board and push the board to sink that into EMS communications and RP. I mean, zero it out.
Because I'd rather see it be
And what that project
used, and it
is-
also avoids that bid process. That when it goes back in the general fund, then it's applicable to the whole bid process for everything you do, and it's not as, it's,
With ARPA, it's still gotta be bid.
It still has to be
We've still
bid.
got to bid that.
It's still gotta be bid.
does it still have, I
Yeah,
knew
We
they
spend,
changed
we
it like
spend
3
money, we
times.
have to bid it. Back to, you didn't quite understand what the communication problem was. And just in a nutshell, 911 is in terrible shape as far as
Yeah.
communicating from home base in Christian County to responders in Shelby County. And that's problem number one.
Sure.
Problem number two is responders, when they're on the ground, when they have their handhelds and portables in their trucks and they're on scene or they're spaced out, then they have trouble communicating back and forth even on scene. So the nutshell project is we need to put a pretty extensive amount of equipment around the county to make it so they can communicate. That's that project in a nutshell.
And what's the cost on that project? Like, do we know yet? Do we have a number?
Oh, it's the entire project has been already quoted at 600,000.
So
That's just Shelby.
So what happens if we, realizing that all of us are affected by that system, our hospitals, everybody, could we not allocate the 600,000 for that because it affects every single person? And then address the items within these windows, which I agree. You cannot have a building without a roof. You cannot have a building with the foundations falling apart. You cannot have water around the building, it ruins things. I mean, you've got no building left. So if we take care of those items, that, to me, that tower would be, I mean, those towers and getting us hooked up would be a good thing, but maybe we need to, again, and the deal with the windows, is it just windows or is it windows and doors? Because I know at times they were talking about just windows. Okay.
We could probably narrow it down to just windows and maybe prioritize some certain things there.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, then you can have the best of everything.
Yeah,
Because we do need the windows. I mean, it's cold as crap in here right now. And I know that has something to do with it. She's probably froze to death.
The
You can feel
napkin
it.
stuck in a
You can
hole over
investigate
here
that
where when the
I mean,
wind
you can
blows.
feel it like radiating it off, so I get it. Because then, you know, if you don't put windows in, you're paying for it. It's going out, well, it's going out the window.
I do know part of the conversation that was had was these bottom floor windows are painted on a regular basis. They've been caulked and better. Clearly, when we have blowouts, they've all come from the third floor. And like you said, prioritize. And Cody talked about it, and they were talking about it the other day, picking out the worst. And I think what would happen if we were limited, third floor gets done first, then this floor,
Yeah.
you know, because we can make those lower ones. They get painted on a regular basis. They're not peeling, rotting, and all that
Right.
stuff like
Right.
these are.
And if you
So-
know, with that interest situation that you can use, I mean, 600,000 is a big number, but if you get a couple 100,000 in interest, and then you say, well, we decided we had 15 windows that need to be dealt with, you've already got the engineering done, you've already seen the product that the person putting in the window provides to you, and you go, yeah, we're gonna finish those, let's decide to put that in the budget the next 2 years, or whatever, so you can get it all, and you can have both.
I'm just gonna tell you, I've been here 5 years. This discussion has been had in budget committee meeting after budget committee meeting after
It's getting
budget.
closer to.
And they talked about, do we do one side a year for 4 years and pay for it? Do we do one
Yeah.
floor and have 3 years that we put it in the budget? So it's, I mean, but then ARPA came along and it's that, luckily,
Sure.
it's pushed it. But I will also tell you, our heat system in our offices that was put in, I don't know if it was 2012, I forget what year, I wasn't here. We have many of those that now need replaced because when they did the roof and they put in the geo, it was with the understanding that the windows were gonna be done. They've not been done, which has stressed our
The heating system.
heating system, which is now we have units that need replaced.
So the windows are important. They are. They are. But maybe, you know, maybe there's a way to get both.
One thing to remember too, when you talk about having them come back each time, every time they come back, it's more expensive.
Well, true. True. Yeah, it's
You know,
true.
the price goes
That's
up, having them reset and get all the equipment in,
Right.
you know, they're, you know.
And again, if it's windows and doors, you know, maybe the windows could be done first and then the doors, because
Yeah.
it's typically different crews.
Well,
And I think that communication tower is a really necessary thing. That's a nightmare, because I know how cell phone coverage is. Some areas, you know, you might get a text message, and someone will say, well, I called you 3 times, we drive 2 miles, and you got 3 messages. So, I mean, I think that would be a priority, and then see what happens with the windows. It may not be as high, I don't know, but maybe there's something there. I know, everything's doubled, everything.
So have we ever had a bid on it?
Yeah, we're just guessing
in
on the last bid.
in 2016, there was a parts list and a bid. And if I remember right, I have it somewhere. It's not in my briefcase. It was right around 800,000 for parts, I believe. And it was like they were going to probably do I think 400,000 in labor. So, but they're talking like labor's.
Do you remember, did that bid have windows and door stuff, or just windows? Because I've heard both, and I'm not sure which it is, if it's both or one.
Bobby, at that point in time, was the focus to do historical windows, to try to make them historical to fit the building, or were the parts at that point, let's just get some windows in that look nice, that are
That
economically.
would make a big difference in the
It
bid.
makes a huge, and I know for a period, they thought they were gonna be able to get a grant for 300-ish thousand, whatever it was.
250,000.
250, but still at that, if the difference in cost to go to historic windows,
That
that
may be part of
250.
it.
They're still
Even-
waiting to see if they can use the 250,000 to take the stucco off to restore to the historic look and account for that, if they choose not to do the historic windows.
And
Because that stucco's gotta come off.
I don't have the report from this week, but it's highly alleged that the stucco is causing the soft walls, like
Oh, sure.
insulation and stuff like that.
Causing mold problems, I think,
Yeah,
and stuff.
it doesn't breathe well.
Too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Sounds like there's lots of moving targets with that deal. With all of it.
there's 2, well, we know of one with communication that's being prioritized as we speak. They're talking about it amongst themselves and prioritizing what that is, which takes that $600,000 number and hopefully shrinks it. But if we come in with a window project that keeps funds available, then we can maybe expand that project back out.
Do you think the 600, is that a pretty accurate amount? I mean, is that a new, recent amount?
It's 585,000, so I use 600 just as.
And I'm like Martha, like if there's grants out there for that, surely there would be. I can't imagine there wouldn't be.
Well, and here's the other part of the equation too, is 911. There's discussion on both boards that 911 at the time, a month or two ago, was willing to boot half of the bill, and then the county boot half the bill, because what 911 is looking at is doing Shelby and Christian. So,
That helps.
but that discussion has gotten throttled back quite a bit on the 911 side due to unforeseen expenses.
Yeah.
So, but both are extremely important. We just need to get the numbers in from the appropriate people and move forward. But nonetheless, we kind of have a rough number of what we have to work with. Oh, but you finished?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, body comment?
There is a,
Teresa?
Can you give us an update on the audit that we've never gotten completed yet?
They are in the process of crossing their T's and dotting their I's.
So what does that mean?
They're writing it, I mean, physically typing it out.
Or will we have it for the board meeting?
Not in
Not this
February, no.
When are they supposed to start the next one?
As soon as I get this one done. The problem is, Teresa, we haven't had if they end up staying with us, it's gonna be a miracle. Because we don't have the documentation and we don't have, I mean, they're working on our financials. I'm assuming they have the single audit done. I called up there yesterday and I called up there today and I left messages. You know, they're doing a lot of work that they shouldn't be doing and no other auditor will do. I think it's why Weston Company dropped us. You know, but they'll start it as soon as the next one is done, is my understanding, but we're gonna have a lot of changes that we have to implement and make in the county to become compliant.
Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong, but the issue is that we're just so decentralized.
Right.
Most counties would have one place to go and departments report or provide documents, information, data, all that good stuff to one place. And we really we should have our own balance sheets, incomes, those types of things that then we're giving to them and then they're reviewing it. The way we're behaving, and I'm going to use the term behaving, is we're expecting an auditor who is to review all of that stuff and make sure I's are dotted. We're expecting them to do the work we should be doing, which is putting all of that information together because we are so decentralized.
But we have an audit every year. Why?
And we've had and the county has had findings year in and year out, year in and year out, year in. I mean, we're going back decades
I understand.
where findings were completely 100% ignored by the board. Years.
I understand.
And that's why we have a very difficult time.
But why aren't we changing some stuff? So that
This
we don't
board
go
is
through?
trying to change
This will be the
stuff.
first audit that this board will look at and have the opportunity to change. Teresa, I've been here 5 years now. I've sat through
We've always
4
had
audits.
reports from the auditors.
But we've
But
not
nothing's
made
been tracked though.
corrections.
protocol.
So, for example,
Thought it changed.
if the board decided there'd be a policy put in place that the treasurer handles all the funds 100% through and throughout, then it would be thought
Well, I mean, I was on city
by
council for 4
the
years.
sheriff or clerk or whoever that those funds are not to be held or to be held by the treasurer.
We fixed them.
Moving to the clerk, you know, she has to hold all the records. So if there's records that are
Do that, then
in the sheriff's office or in the treasurer's office or in the highway department, they're not in the clerk's office. The same, one of the point issues, if I'm recalling correctly, is it's what they call it. It's an inventory sheet. It's
Assets. Is that what you're talking
yeah, it's
about?
capital asset.
Capital assets.
capital asset list. So effectively, I've always been kind of curious, is how do we know what we have? We don't have a capital, we don't know.
Yeah, that's a mess.
So all this has never been done right before.
No, no, it's not been done right before. There should be a list that is kept in the clerk's office that has every vehicle in the sheriff, every vehicle in the highway department, if there's anything EMA zoning, health. If the board were to purchase, say, 2 vehicles for department heads to use when they go to training, something like that, you know, that inventory is to be on a list, and it can be maintained by the department head, but it's held, the master list is like held by the clerk. You know, that's the clerk's job, is to keep the records. These are just 2 examples of things that need to change for the purposes of future audits, because whenever the auditor comes in and says, we need this information, they go click, scan, boom, done. Whereas right now, to find this information, they've got to send out, whoever, be a clerk or treasurer, whoever is looking for the information, has to send out numerous emails to get the information back, and then that comes in bits and pieces. Maybe certain departments respond, certain don't respond, or how it works out, and it becomes just an absolute disaster putting them together.
Can I
So-
speak to that, Holly?
Okay.
Can I speak to that? In our fixed assets and in our financial system, I didn't know we didn't have those records until this audit, because prior auditors have just done it. They created the spreadsheet, which then the current auditors went back to the last auditors who got the sheet from the prior auditors. That said, in the before the last budget year was over, I don't remember if we ordered it in October or November, we have a module on that in our financial system called fixed assets. We paid, I forget how much, we had it in the budget, we ordered that, and I don't know if Jessica's gotten it yet. I know we've paid for it. I know it's going to be added to the system to where she can just go in and have it. It's there. We buy a car, a cop car, a 2024. It goes in that fixed asset module with its, can't think of the word, starts with a D, and then it's there. Should be the click of a button that moving
Depreciation.
forward. So we are fixing things. Thank you, depreciation. These things are getting fixed. But first, some people have to be aware that there are even, issues.
So shouldn't each department head be able to give the auditor the information?
No, each department head, one department head,
One department?
one central location for this information.
For everything.
And the problem we're running into now is when our auditors were across the street, I know the first year I was here, came in December of 18 and they were doing an audit, they could come over here and set up in this jury room for 2-3 weeks at a time. And they would go to each department. They would go out to the highway. They would go out to the health department. They could go out because they're right here. We no longer have local auditors.
Why?
Because they don't want it.
Just because they don't have the people to do it. And it's not just a Shelby County issue. There's
Don't want it.
conversations. Moultrie County couldn't find an
So we have
auditor.
to go to Chicago to find an auditor? Is that what you're
Yeah, you pretty much
Well,
do
we had
have
to
to,
go
Jake.
We went to, Rockford last year?
We were in Sterling.
Sterling.
Sterling the year before that it was Effingham. We just got emails out last week and I've sent out emails to the board. It is a statewide issue right now with counties getting auditors. I have township supervisors who stop me that say they can't even find someone to audit something so small as a township. One of our local townships had to go all the way over to either Hillsborough or Greenville to get an auditor to audit a little township. It is a major problem I don't know if it's nationwide, I know it's a problem in the state of Illinois.
So the auditing firm we are using, they can't come down here and do it and have someone here to take care of it?
And the problem is then you pay. And they will be here, but it's not their job to come down here and set up shop and go to all these departments. Everything has to be centralized.
Everything that they need.
Centralized order.
In one department.
Should we be looking at a county administrator then? Someone that could put all this stuff together ahead of time and keep these offices coordinated?
Well, it would be simple if everybody just sent all their stuff to one place that we've already got. Like if they send it all to the treasurer, then she could just send it all to the auditor.
But does she need to do that?
But it's the
My
clerk's,
question.
That's my statutory
No,
responsibility.
no, I don't mean that. I mean, no, I'm saying if, let's say the highway department buys a new truck. I mean, we're in the world of computers now. Why, when they update their list of these
Because when
items, is an update on your end as well?
it's not my end, Jessica's
But I mean
accounts,
but I mean
Jessica's
the-
accounts
the
payable,
computer
so when
knows
that
that.
payment goes out, it needs to be expensed out of capital outlay, a line item in the highway budget or motor fuel, whatever fund they're spending it out of. And once it's paid out as capital outlay, once that system gets built, I would think she could go into that fixed assets and you add a new asset. You know, you do it right then and there when you write the check for $150,000 and we all move on. It's a matter of a few minutes.
So it doesn't
But when
automatically
we
do
haven't
it?
had anything and now we have to build it, it's gonna take her, I don't know how much time it's gonna take her, but it's still, and Bobby and I sat in a meeting along with several department heads where the auditors kind of gave us a little bit of a chastisement because we're so decentralized. And if we don't get that fixed, we won't have an auditor. We won't find an auditor.
It's the same way as in a hospital, it goes from paper charting to computerized charting. There's lab and there's x-ray and all those things, so I get it, but I'm surprised that there isn't some, you know, when they buy something, add something, it doesn't automatically update on your end or send you a notice. This has been updated, you make sure it goes in and then.
And
then
it
you don't
might
have
be
to
with
do
that new module that we bought. I don't see that in because that module is controlled by her office. Like I said, I don't know, I know we bought it. I don't know when they were installing it, when they were training her. I just know if it's not already in process, it's coming.
Yeah, and part of that is just that, you know, like I said, that particular aspect of it can be maintained by the department head, where the sheriff can, you know, say, either through email, come over to the office, do whatever, say, hey, what's my list look like? And just make sure it's updated and correct. You know, if that list, if the board surpluses something, then, well, the board took action to surplus that vehicle so that can be struck from the list. Not removed, but struck because it shows it was there at one time, you know,
Right.
for a record of history. But the issue that we've seen actually in the last 4 years that I've been around, we started with the firm here in town, and then we went to Weston Company for 2 years, and they terminated their agreement 2 years into a 3-year agreement. Then we went with Whipley. They terminated after the first year, and then we've got Benford Brown. So hopefully they don't terminate after this year too. So, but back to finding an auditor, that is not just us, it's everybody.
So we have,
Right, Drew?
Okay. You're talking about this forensic audit and bringing all this stuff back to that man and having him update the forensic audit. I think somebody better talk to that man because I'm not so sure that they want to do anything else. I'm not speaking for them. From what I've been told, I don't know if you would get them to come back and complete anything, is what I've been told.
I totally agree.
Okay?
I totally agree.
There's that part of it. And then you speak to, you got records that they were told didn't exist and stuff. I don't know who, you know, those employees over there have changed. So you're talking about who's responsible. The person that maybe was responsible isn't even an employee over there anymore.
They're not.
Yes, they are.
One of them's
Yes,
not.
they are.
The one who destroyed the record is still there.
Oh. Okay.
Bobby, do we have a problem with the county clerk keeping her books for the health department, or is it somebody that's not taking care of things properly?
Everybody.
Everybody, no one,
So, in the roundabout way, we're going to propose a policy. And the policy is going to specifically lay out how records will be kept for auditing purposes.
So at the present time, like the county clerk's office isn't doing their job like it should? Or is the health department not doing their job like they should? I mean, where's the
I don't know
problem?
that I would take that
I mean,
bait.
it's,
Uh-uh.
what you're
Don't take the bait, Bobby.
assimilating is that they're not doing their job the way they should. They may not know they're not doing their job the way they should. And in the last 8 months, we're learning how these records are to be kept. So,
So then the auditing firm is coming in here and telling them what they need to do. Is that right?
sorry?
The auditing firm is coming here telling them what they need to do to make things like they should do.
The auditing firm is telling us how we need to keep our records. Yeah, but by and large, that would be 4 times over that we've heard 4 different auditors say the same thing. So, is there any public comment over here?
I've got a question about the ARPA, and the one thing that I've been watching for years, I'm a neighbor over at the wedding chapel, watched them redo the building and the clock. I just keep wondering if that clock is ever going to be working, or is it going to continue to be a black eye on our community?
You know, that was discussed in December of 2019 and probably January of 2020. It hasn't been broached since then.
I think there's.
Remember
a
the
guy
man
from
who
came to the board meeting
Oh.
There was a guy from
Mattoon,
Munson.
and he offered to go up
I
and
know
work
who
on
he
the
is.
clock, and I don't know if anybody ever got in touch with him.
think I
He
know
left
who
his
he is.
name with somebody,
I think he's been up there, I
yeah.
think.
So that was
He's-
maybe in the summer.
He's looked at pictures for safety reasons. I think he's looked at videography of pictures. And I think it was deduced that, and somebody's got his contact. I know somebody does because they talked to him.
Julie doesn't.
His name was probably in
But to the
minutes.
best of my knowledge, the part that's missing has been tried to be fabricated, but failed.
There's gotta be somebody that does that. How do you
I
say that? All
don't
sorts
know
of
if anybody
things.
has any interest, but there is a company, Post Arcola, that will make any kind of window with any kind of molding and install them and take the others out. And I don't know if they would give you, if it's something where they could give you a price on one window, maybe, and maybe that would give you an idea what it would cost to do the rest of them. It's just another choice.
That's all they
Well,
do is windows.
That's all they do, windows and doors, they don't make anything else.
Yeah, and they'll have prime opportunity to bid on the project, I'm sure.
Okay,
Pardon?
They'll have prime opportunity to bid on the project.
they'll have an opportunity to bid on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they'll have prime opportunity to bid.
We'll get the great
I'll get in touch with them, at least give them your name and, you know.
Don't give my name.
Well, I mean, tell them where this, what's going on. Explain the situation, but not necessarily give them your name.
Yeah, I'm not heading that project. But to back to your question though, I don't know. I'm sure for you as a neighbor, it's an eyesore. Now I'm gonna ask this question candidly. Would it fix anything if we spun each clock to the quarter of the day? Noon, 3, 6, and 9. And just leave them. That way they're not like off at 7:52 and 8:46 and whatever. I mean, I don't know. But if we can't get a working mechanism, at least put them to where they're, when you go around the courthouse, you go kind of through the day. I don't know.
East, south, west, and north.
I don't know. It's kind of a off the cuff question, it's kind of a thought, but I have no idea what to do with it at the moment. Quite frankly, I haven't thought.
They were built once, someone could build them again, but I don't know how many.
Yeah, I think the issue becomes, like, anything can be built for the right price, but when we've had these conversations about the emergency system, we've had conversations about the windows, and if we can afford this. I mean, when you get to the end of the day of, the county only has so much money to spend, and we have to prioritize that.
It's also only.
Is it pretty?
$70
No,
a day.
it's not, but I can tell you, I live here and drive by this all the time, and I never look at the clock, because I have a watch that's digital, and I have a clock in my car that tells me what time it is, so, you know, I'm like, Bobby, can we fix them at a specific time, rotating around the 4, and
Let's take a
If-
tour up there. and
if they're
see.
that ugly, take them out. for
Wanna
me.
go see
I don't
it?
know. I mean, I could take them out. Wouldn't they-
It's a no.
How much
Oh,
do
it's
you
a
want to go up
firm
there?
no.
You know what I mean?
Okay, so individually you can talk to,
Custodian,
yes, Culberson.
yes.
Tim?
Tim, individually, if you want to go up and look, go up and look. But I'm gonna tell you, when you go up there, take sturdy shoes, and
Safety
something-
harness
some-
and
Well, you're
a, safety
fortunate.
harness and something to hook onto?
But take sturdy shoes and don't wear a nice white jacket, because it is dirty, so.
Fishnet for the bats?
Yeah, it's, so, anyway, without further, is there any other public comment? Once, twice, 3 times, motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.